How many people were here at the last meeting that we just had a week ago? Anybody repeaters? Yep, I got you. Good. So all new faces. That's good. And how many of you were here last year when we did this? Okay, so I'm going to try to skip over some of the history then. I'll try to get some in for you all, but just bear with me. It's some of the same stuff, and then we'll get into the good stuff. I got some feedback from the last meeting from residents that were here, that came to the last meeting. So I've changed it up a little bit since last week. So if you see me tell some individuals to talk to me after the meeting instead of ask questions, it's because they're dominating the meeting, and I got some feedback on that. So don't think I'm being mean. We just want to make sure that the people who haven't heard this before and haven't had a chance to ask questions do, okay? So we are going to address some of the stuff that we hear, the concerns we hear, not just on Facebook, but when we go to Publix or when I go to the park and see you all. When I go to walk my dog, I get stopped and people say, "Hey, what's going on?" So I want to, just make sure, we want to make sure that you all have the right information. We're not here to change your opinion. We just want to make sure that your opinion's based on reality and fact. So we're here to give you that information today. And so here's some of the stuff that we see on Facebook that we want to address. We want to make sure that, when we hear things like we're going to turn into Fort Lauderdale, we want to make sure that that that's probably not altogether true. And this is kind of the items that we're going to discuss today. We're going to talk about how we developed in the city, how it was developed, kind of the history of our acquisition of our beaches. The city does own 40% of our beach. So some of those things, and talk about how that has impacted our community. And then we're going to talk about some of the development that you've seen and how that was done, and then why it was done in certain ways. And then we're going to talk about property rights in the state of Florida and how that impacts the decisions that we make. And then also some of the recent proposals that we're bringing to you. And that's the stuff that you got in the mail, and asking you to come to these meetings so we can explain them to you. So, Mayor, you want to do any of this? Or yeah, come on up and do. He's better at this because he was here. I wasn't born yet.
It's great working with her.
Here, do you want the...
How does it work?
You were making fun of me because I didn't know how to do the button just a minute ago. It's that one downward button, the downward button.
Oh, okay. So I get to do it because I've been here the longest. So the city, for when Percy Hedgecock founded it in the late 50s, 57, 58 time frame, there was always a mindset of open space and recreation. It sat on his wall, this plaque that said, "Put a ball in a kid's hand and take the brick out." So from day one, sports and recreation and open fields in our town was always a major concern to us. And that was kind of what started the way the city was kind of formed around recreation, schools, and open spaces. So in 1957, we were incorporated, and the first Civic Center was built and a lot donated by Lewis Olson in 1957. And it's by where Olson Field is. Does everybody know where that is, the baseball field there? That was, believe it or not, the center of town. When I was a kid, it was really the only thing in town. In that vicinity, there was the ball field and Civic Center. We called it the Civic Center, but it was really City Hall. City Hall was made up of the fire department, one bay, City Hall, and the next building next to it was a house, and it was the police department. So that's where everything was kind of based out of. Public Works was very loosely handled right in that area also. All right, hold on. So we were really lucky and kind of interesting that our mayor was also on the school board, and we happened to acquire quite a few schools in our town. So we had the Holland Dolores Satellite High School campus, which makes up about 75 acres. Sam Fuchs, a developer from North Carolina, sold the land to the schools for 1960. Surfside Elementary School was a 12-acre parcel. Mayor Hedgecock sold it at a loss in 1960 to have the school built there. And that's where Surfside is today. I believe 1964 it was open. 62. I went there, that's the only reason I know. And the recreation complex, or excuse me, the City Hall complex now, which makes up our City Hall, the Civic Center, Hedgecock Brothers Field, which makes up 5 acres, was a 1965 project. The land cost $25,000 to us instead of the $150,000 Mr. McGuire, the major landowner in Indian Harbor Beach. Okay. And that's the complex today. It was built in 1965. Sampson Island, a 62-acre park, was donated in 1968, and it gave us a park on the water. Since we're a waterfront community, it gave us that park on the water. There was a lot of different things that were thought of going there. One was a marina. They actually cleared it at one time. That never really materialized, and through its time, it became the park it is today with the nature trails in it and some waterways for kayaks and canoes. Pelican Beach Park, 6.7 acres. The city, Sam Fuchs sold it to Brevard County, and in 1971 it was in 1971, and then the county transferred the title to the city of Satellite Beach in 2012. DeSoto Park was 15 acres. It was purchased in 1975. DeSoto Park, which is now a Stormwater, which they'll tell about in the presentation, was a school site. They weren't going to use the school site. We got a chance to purchase it. And you got to remember, the mentality was the more recreation facilities there was, the better. And that made up the baseball field at DeSoto and open space for recreation, where the tennis courts are, racquetball courts, and so forth. Fire station was purchased from the volunteer fire department for $45,000 and donated to the city in 1977. So you got to remember, when I grew up, the fire station was in the back of City Hall, one bay. You know when a fire was because the siren. And it was a totally volunteer fire department. It was made up of all the builders. And you knew when that went off as a kid, you better get out of the street because they were coming. Except for Wednesday at 5 minutes to 7, it went off, and that's when they would eat. That would be their meeting. Sports and Recreation Park, which sits right here to us, was owned by the county. It was a sewage treatment plant. We were running out of, believe it or not, recreation space years back, and we went to the county and asked them if we could join with them, allow their citizens who live up in the area north of our city. They participated in our soccer leagues, our baseball leagues, football leagues, help us out by giving us land. So what you see out here was the donation. I think we ended up $100, and we purchased it from them, and it makes up the parks today. The beach. So about 1981, I believe I'm correct, that we did a survey, went out to the citizens. And this kind of set forth the process of acquiring beachfront property. At that time, we sent this survey out, and the number one thing was access to the beach. People wanted access to the beach. They didn't want a lot of building on the beach. And the next thing was most important was the safety, the crossing of A1A for the residents. So at that time, the city went out and started trying to acquire beachfront property. One of our thoughts was at that time that you could walk down the street towards the beach and not have to walk more than a block either way to find an access. An access could be a park, it could be a park with parking, it could be a fully developed park, Pelican Beach, Park, or Hightower. And so we started the process. We redid the survey in the 90s, and if we took all the dates off the survey and laid them down, they mimicked each other, almost to the T. People wanted the beach. They wanted safety cross in A1A. The hardest part of the whole thing, which to me was always should have been the easiest, was the easy crossing of A1A. It took us until this past years to get A1A resurfaced, crosswalks put in for safety. It took us that long. The beach, we got grants. We got 20 million, I think is the figure, dollars in grants to buy property. We own 40% of the beach. We tried to buy a lot more of the beach that is developed today, but we didn't have the funds. There weren't grants available to buy more. And anytime you buy something, there's got to be somebody willing to sell it to you. So we acquired the rest of the beach property. Oops, sorry. Okay, let me see. I think I went through this. Okay. So again, this is the referendum that was held to purchase beach property. It passed pretty handily that people wanted to save the beach. That's the Hightower resulted in 17.1 acres, the total piece there. It's the last piece that's in front of, if I'll use the term, old base housing. That stretch, with that grant, you can never build on those pieces of property today. They'll always be in preservation. We also, one of the pieces we picked up was Mike Crotty Park, which was an old Hess station years ago, gas station. And they gave us another park with parking, and it's an undeveloped park. We didn't make it like Hightower or Pelican Beach. It's just parking, and we left it as natural as we could in that area. So to take a look at what Satellite Beach has done for keeping green space, here it is. We own 147 acres, almost 148 acres of open space. Ball fields, green space in our city. Whether it's the ocean, Sampson Island, everything added together, 147. Indian Harbor Beach, 59. Indialantic, 17. So one of the big features that the city councils through the time wanted to make sure we did was protect the beach. It also came, and we knew when we were doing this, that we were taking off the tax rolls, the highest taxable property in our city. But the citizens told us overwhelmingly with 3 or 4 of these surveys that they definitely wanted the beach protected. And that's got us to where we're at today, and part of what Courtney's going to talk about, development of the rest of the areas we have open. Any questions on the beach?
I have a question about all of these listings that you have here of non-tax area.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sampson Island, for example. How many of these properties are only accessible like by water, such as Sampson?
One.
Okay, that's it.
That's it. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yep. And just a little bit of history on that island itself. The island originally had no cuts in it. It was one single island when it was semi-made. Okay. Lansing Tortoise Island, which makes up part of Sampson Island stretch, that was one island. So through the time, because they didn't want to put as many drawbridges and stuff back then in, they cut the cuts that connect the Banana River to it. There was only 2 originally. They're the one on the north end, which is next to Pineda Causeway, and the south end in Indian Harbor Beach. The rest of it was a solid island. Through development, they put it. That's the only piece of property that we own that is accessible by only water. Okay.
Where is the north and south of Hightower on the beach? How far does that go up in that? And then parking and is rehab, like what's done on the beaches, is that up too?
Mhm.
And how big is that?
I'm not sure. Behind Sun on the Beach, I'm not sure what that, exactly the acreage there. We own that behind Sun on the Beach, okay, because we just we developed that a couple of years ago. We took the houses that were there off of septic tank. They're all on sewer. We repaved it. Coming up, Pelican Beach Park, we talked about that. High Tower, from the north city limits of Satellite Beach, south to the first house. Okay? Mm-hmm. Courtney, any other questions?
I have one other question, clarifying question. When we talk about Sun on the Beach, are we talking about the new location where?
No, sir. I'm sorry. So, old Sun on the Beach, Shell Street, behind Papa Gallows, that is our, that's the one we just redid. No, that's okay.
The area between where the old base housing is and the public, is that the area that's reserved area that's on Montecito Townhomes? Or what is that?
No, okay. I'm talking about anything that's on the beach owned by the city, okay? The area that we call it, the 110 acres, I think is what most people refer to. No, that's not ours. That is part of the base privatization of it. And if I'm not mistaken, the base has the rights to it for 50 years? 30 more. No, on that, yeah. Any other? Thank you, Courtney.
All right. So I put this a lot in every budget presentation that we give for the proposed budget or adopted budget, because that's one of the issues that we face as a city when we do, that sometimes residents don't think about, is when we do take these things off the tax rolls, especially along the beach. So to give you an idea of how much that matters, is our beachfront is 4% of the land area in the city and 22% of the tax base. So when you take things off like that, the rest of the city pays for that. So, when we talk about increasing recreational lands, it's great, but it does take it off, first the property off the tax rolls, and then it adds the maintenance costs to the city's operation. So we always think about these things pretty extensively before we do it. And that's why the city did things like surveys, referendums, making sure that the residents wanted that before we triggered that. And there's some other referendums and questions that the city posed to the community, and we usually do this before every major decision. So, Ramada. Who likes the new Oceana condos? Exactly. One, we got one. So this is the other thing I hear at Publix every time I go there, especially when it was being constructed. I usually made my husband go because I knew what people thought. And I always lived in Satellite Beach, but I worked in other areas. And so when this was being done by the city at the time being approved, I remember reading it in the newspaper, and I remember thinking, it kind of stinks that we're not going to have the hotel anymore, because that's I guess it's just something we're always used to. And the council heard that too. They had the meetings with Oceana. There was countless of people, countless of meetings. I would think it was like at least 10 or 12 meetings, packed room at all times. And so that decision wasn't made lightly, and it wasn't made behind closed doors or anything. It was very much well publicized at the time. So the Ramada Inn was across from Publix. It had 108 units of hotel units, and it was actually approved for an additional 45 on the same property, but they just never triggered the building of it. And at that time, you could see the idea of hotels have kind of changed over the time. They've gotten bigger. They have more convention space. There's more amenities. And so this type of hotel, once it was damaged by the hurricanes, the flag, Ramada Inn, just decided to leave and put it up for sale. And so this building was approved for 69 feet and 85 feet with the elevator shaft. And that's how high the building was. And before I get too involved, I'm going to just make sure I point out my city council members that are here. You already talked to the mayor. Councilwoman Mindy Gibson's here. Councilman Vice Mayor Mark Breimer's here. This is my Assistant City Manager Liz Allward, and Councilwoman Rizicki is here. And then back there is Mayor David Schechter, former Mayor David Schechter. He's the one that we named the Schechter Center after. If you know. And then I see a Chief Cody, a former Chief Cody back there. So I just wanted to make sure I got those introductions. And then back there is John Stone, my building official, and he's probably going to come up and talk when I get stuck. If I say something wrong, he'll be like, no, that's wrong. So when they did these approvals, the same developer who purchased the Ramada site, which is now the Oceana site, also owned basically a 2-acre lot across the street from Elwood. And this, what we call it, the Gemini property, if you ever hear the city staff refer to it, that is because we refer to it because that's the name of the development that was getting ready to go in there. And the developer actually had development permits to do this development, like building permits. And the city said, after 23 public meetings, I was even wrong, 23 public meetings in 2005 and 2006, they increased the height and density at Oceana in exchange for the city obtaining the title to Elwood. And the logic behind that at the time was that the Publix Plaza, you know, the Oceana is across the street from the Publix Plaza, going a little higher wouldn't disrupt any residents. But over on Elwood, having a condo over there would be disruptive to them. And then also that area didn't have a beach access, and that would be another way to add to the city's beach accesses for an area that didn't have one at that time. So they also required in the developer's agreement for them to add another beach access to the other side of Oceana. So that will be constructed as soon as their condominiums are CO'd. They also required $50,000 for the city to streetscape A1A as part of that developer's agreement, basically to improve the access points and everything for that development. And then they also, says the same thing. So another thing I hear a lot is that the Oceana didn't pay impact fees. And so the Oceana paid $550,000 worth of impact fees to Brevard County, to whoever's collecting the impact fees. So it depends on who's collecting them. In this case, it was Brevard County and the school board. So you can see the different requirements here. There's, they paid to emergency medical services, correctional facilities, library services, solid waste, schools, sewer, and Melbourne Water. Okay? And at the time that this was approved, there was no transportation impact fees at the time, and there was a moratorium by the county. And the city participates in the impact fees of the county. So we choose to require our developers to pay the same impact fees as the county does. And at the time, the county didn't have any transportation impact fees, but now those have been reinstated. And so any development that occurs after last year has to pay for those impact fees. And transportation is actually quite high. But nothing is as high as schools. Schools is about, for a condominium unit, it's about $2,000 per unit. For a single family home, it's about $4,500.
These impact fees, are they one time or annually?
No, they're one time. So they're designed to take the impact of the development itself, and they can only be spent in the general area. So when you collect a fee, there has to be a rational nexus to what you spend it on, and so it has to be in that area. So those impact fees for schools will go into a district fund, and it funds impact fees in that general district. And I sit on the committee that distributes those funds. So a lot of us do. So does Liz. So those are, there's a lot of laws behind impact fees, and so they can only be used very specifically for that purpose. And it can only be for capacity improvements, meaning that it has to be an expansion of the facility. So you can't use it for maintenance or anything like that. You can only use it for increasing the facility to take in the new development, okay?
Is there white along that side with the parking lights on? Has anybody, I don't want to run around to dead batteries.
Thank you. So when we did that development, there was, again, that many meetings, there was a lot of people that were very upset with that decision. And they wanted to make sure that the residents could vote on any future increases in height and density. So they petitioned to council, and council put on the ballot this referendum. And this basically requires the voters to approve any height and density increase in the city in the future. So after it was voted on, the voters have to approve any height or density increase in the zoning district, okay? And so that was done in 2006, and these were the results of that referendum. And this is in the charter right now, okay?
I was at the last meeting when the city council approved Oceana. I was part of one of the residents attending, and I can tell you, city council favors density. And during the final approval process, I was a little concerned that why was, and you know it, Gail and Ron, we had come to council meeting, there was nobody there to even address the issue of Oceana. I'm not debating the fact that it might not be the right project, but I'm just concerned that hopefully the right information is coming out, because there was nobody there to object.
Which one?
The last hearing that I recall. And correct me if I'm wrong.
The Oceana was
That was approved in 2004.
2004, 2005,
Yeah.
that's correct. And there was quite a few people who kind of come into those meetings. Like she had stated before, it was a trade-off for a piece of property that developed. But there was people at the meeting, and it was 2004, not.
You're absolutely right. And then I got to segue into something else when we had budget meetings, I think it was last year or maybe the year before, because of cash flow issues, there was consideration brought up to put the trade-off property that is now going to be a park, put it as a trade-off property by the city itself.
That is absolutely not true.
Yeah,
I've never had that on the council agenda ever. That's not true.
It's not on the capital agenda. It was in a committee that proposed it.
Okay.
That's all I'm referring to.
Okay, well, that's not some, committees, the council appoints them to review things so they can discuss things, but that was never a discussion among city council. And I'm going to have to ask for a little leeway here to get through the presentation, Ron. I got some complaints from the last meeting of certain residents dominating the meeting, and since we have a lot of new people here, I want to give them the chance to talk through it, okay? Thank you so much. You were a good one, though, to say. Okay, so this is Pelican Coast. Everybody knows where Pelican Coast is, right? That's the old military housing site. Who was here during the time that it was military housing? Yeah, see, we got a lot of older residents here tonight. So I remember, no, not older, not meaning old. I meant like having lived here a long time, yes. Because I grew up here too, and I remember driving through, and I remember I had friends that lived there when I was a kid, and they were gross then. So having it redeveloped at this point is, a long time coming. But this happened these were built in 1957, okay, some of the older units in the city. And there was 999 living units. Now, you remember if anybody's military that lived there, anybody? No? You lived there? And you had to have a family, right, to be able to live there? Yeah, so you had to, but they had to be a family to be able to get qualified to live there. So it was definitely not for single members or anything like that. They had to have a family. So there was quite a bit of population at these locations. Cocoa Water is their water, and Cocoa Beach Sanitary Sewer serves that property. Brevard County Sewer serves the rest of the city. I know that's hard, because of course that has to be us, we have to be different. But the Cocoa Beach Sewer serves this property. Brevard County Sewer serves everyone else, okay? At the time, there was no stormwater treatment, and by the 1990s, it was definitely substandard and pretty badly deteriorated. And this is what it looked like back then. And so, what are some of the things that you see in new development that you don't see here? Ponds, exactly. Stormwater, and that takes a lot of space. And so that's when you see, if you see like the same amount of units, you'll see development clustered over to make way for these ponds. And that happens a lot with new development. So you'll see the per acre density of new development be very similar to older development, but they'll have smaller lot sizes, and that's because they have to cluster the development so they can make room for these new ponds. And that's a new requirement now. So you can look at new development now, and right away, 20% of that site's going to be moved over for stormwater. That's the new requirements now. So in 1998, Patrick Air Force Base issued a notice to privatize, and as part of the federal installation, it wasn't in the county and it wasn't in the city. So they approached the city to annex into the city because they wanted city services. They wanted police and they wanted fire and all that. So the city was agreeable to waiving permit fees and providing an on-site inspector to expedite construction and to providing city services. And the reason why is the city was interested in the tax base, but also wanted to control the development there. So to give you an example of why, I think I just heard from, we got the agenda for County Commission. The County Commission just approved 33 units over at Shoreview tonight with a 5-0 vote, and I bet none of you knew about it. So that's why we want, we had a bigger desire to do, to be able to control this development, because you're here, sitting here, learning about it and getting ready to give us some input in some of the proposals that we have, and that's important to the city. And so we wanted to make sure that the residents had some ability to weigh in on it. Yes, sir.
Does this Pelican Coast, does that extend all the way to Penn, or is it just?
No. Yeah, it's just that site. So here's the outline of the site right here. Here, it goes up here, and it goes up to that white line right there, up at the top. Yep. Yep.
That's now part of the city?
Yep. Yeah. Oh, wait, sorry. This is important. So the city, when, sometimes there's this idea that the city council just does things without asking, and the city actually put on the ballot to ask their residents, do you want us to annex this? And the citizens said, 77% said yes. So it wasn't done in a vacuum, and it wasn't done as a secret. It was done very well out in the open, and was done by vote to make sure that the residents were okay with the city going this direction. So after this was done, the annexation was effective, and I always put the notices were completed, because that was another rumor that was going around, and that the PUD provided, basically, a PUD is a plan unit development concept, and what that does is it's like zoning, but it makes a developer go through 3 more steps than just going through zoning. So if a property gets zoning, for example, like Doubles, right? They had a zoning district, and when they came in for permitting, they just went through staff. So we make sure all their engineering meets code, their development meets the zoning requirements, and they get a building permit and they move on. There's no public approval, there's no requirement for any of that. If you go through a PUD, there is. So you have to get a concept plan approval, a preliminary master plan approval, and a final master plan approval. So that was part of that discussion. And the city outlined what that zoning was, adopted an ordinance to complete that zoning, and at the same time, in the same ordinance, the city did a number of down zonings throughout the whole city for property that was developed. Particularly, there's the one, John, you remember the one that's across the street from Doubles, that area, that residential area? Yeah. 64 units, yeah. So what they did, and this is, the owners of the property wanted to downzone their property because at the time, it was the height of the market and developers were calling them. Sell your house to us, we want to put condos in, and they didn't want their neighborhood to change. So they all got together and they asked the city, and the city said yes, to downzone their property to make sure that their property wasn't attractive anymore to condominium developers. It was the same ordinance that this happened, right? I don't know. It's on that sheet that I have in my... I think it was the other side of your neighborhood, Ron. The other side of the street, the south side. That was the south side. Yeah, come in and see me, because it's ordinance 812. Okay?
Question. Was there an agreement signed between the Air Force and the United States of America and the city of Salt Lake when that annexation became effective in 2003?
Do we have a developer's agreement for that property? I don't think so. It was a PUD and zoning that we did. Yeah.
So when was that document signed with the United States of America /
I just said that there wasn't. We just had a zoning and a
the
PUD.
Three document agreement with the Air Force? I have seen it, I just can't remember when it was.
There's no document that was signed. It's an ordinance in a zoning district. Okay. So there was at least 15 public meetings that were held on this property, and I'm going to show you the plan in a minute. Annexation benefits. The new homes met current code. This water source switched from Cocoa to Melbourne. Okay. The sewer connection remained in Cocoa Beach. So Cocoa Beach is still the treatment for this property. There is a master stormwater master plan. And the increases to the city tax base with non-military housing areas. So military housing usually gets a tax abatement, or a tax exemption. But there's a whole north side of this property that's all private development, and so the city gets that tax base.
That property is north of Civic.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. And this is the plan that was approved. Okay, so what has been developed is this area right here for military housing, okay? This is all vacant. It's all vacant right here. And that's remaining in the military's, the military has an agreement with Hunt Development, which owns this property, that they can trigger military housing at any moment. So that will remain whenever either the military decides to build it or the military decides they don't want it and releases that agreement. So this is Montecito, single family, okay? This is Montecito Townhomes. And this is the 27 acres you're gonna hear about pretty soon. That's coming in. I think you saw like the release of those condo buildings, that form thing on Facebook. So this is what's been approved. No.
Can I ask a question?
No. So I got complaints at the last meeting, and if everybody got here on time, they would know, about individuals that were dominating the meeting. So I'm going to ask the people that were here last time to ask questions later, and the new people have time to be able to do that. Yes, sir.
Just curious, as to so why did the water switch to Melbourne and the sewer to Cocoa?
I have no idea. I don't know. I think the sewer stayed with Cocoa Beach because the military uses, the whole base is Cocoa Beach. Okay? But I don't know why the water, and I think it might have been because Cocoa's service area is north of Pineda. And so they might have just wanted to clean it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think they just probably wanted a clean split. So, yeah, it makes it a lot easier for them. And yes, ma'am.
Where's High Tower in relationship to that? Because I'm not familiar.
High Tower is right here.
Oh, yeah.
So there's the park, and this is our preservation areas right here.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and so this is condo 1, condo 2, condo 3. They decided these are all condominiums that are how many stories? 65 feet, I think, right? Okay. Yeah, these are all 85 feet. So this property is all 85 feet height, okay? The developer that has been speaking with us today, or not today, but this recently, is getting ready to submit plans. And they came in to check with us to see if they could do these condominiums here, do a hotel here, and make all of this single-family homes. So they're reducing their residential unit count by 173 units because they felt the market was better for single-family homes in this area right here. So it'll look very similar to the lot size of Montecito. Okay?
How many times is the number of units in that?
It hasn't changed at all. No, that's what they want to develop less, but the city hasn't reduced their units.
They will submit another plan showing.
Yes, sir. That's what they want to do, from what I understand. So they're getting ready. They said that they're getting ready to submit in a couple weeks. So when they get that, we'll let people know and you can come look at them. Yes, sir.
I'm trying to count, but it looks like 17 or so buildings, I would say, in that area. We're
Yes.
talking about. And they were all going to be 85 feet.
I think that they were focusing more on a 65 to 45 level here. Yeah, like it was these. Yeah, these are 85 feet here. But the whole area is zoned for 85 feet, up to 85 feet. So what the city did was, once you have stormwater, all these blue areas are stormwater, right? And then this is a central, park location, stormwater here. And once you get all that in, what they did because the base needed single-family homes, they shoved all the density up to this corner here. And so that's where you see the concentration is right here. Yes. No. That's 96 feet, and that's the only place that can be that way. And this area is the only place that can go 85 feet in the city. So I'll show you the zoning map in just a minute, and it'll kind of clear it up for you. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. I think we've only been meeting with the engineer, so we don't know. Okay, so then I did this again so you can see the old, and then this is the status of the PUD currently. So the military housing is about a third built out, and the remaining is an agreement for 30 years, and then the 27 acres is still moving forward. And then this is the current aerial today. You'll see a little bit more of this built out now. And then this is cleared now. But this is all going to probably stay the same for a while. And so,
Have control over all of that land,
who?
properties
They have control
over,
over this area right here.
okay, that's what
Yes, yeah.
that's basically.
Yes. So the military decided they want to privatize their housing. They only needed this area, and then they sold off this area to pay for the military. Because the military housing is, the developer has to rent out within the housing allowance. and those are usually less than the cost of developing the housing. So they will either give a subsidy up front to the developer to do that, or they give them land. And this is generally how that goes. So you'll see, like, if you go to Key West and see how that panned out, same thing. You know, you'll see all the private development happen because that's how the military can afford privatizing the military housing without giving out cash, right? Yes.
I have to apologize because I thought I was following you.
Okay.
I really did.
That's okay. It's very complicated, so no worries.
I thought, no, I didn't hear it in the last couple of years. I thought, for
So the developer has always had the right to do these condos, all of these. They've always talked to us about keeping those condos, the big ones up front, and then they're changing these out to single-family homes.
Okay, the second part of my question is, and here's also, my question also pertains to right now. What exactly is the number of condos in the city?
In Oceana, it's 108, yes? Right, Matt? Yes, 108. So it's the same amount of units as the Ramada. Yep. And this, they are approved. John, do you know the units off the top of your head?
Again, along the way, you got the hotel and one north of those three condos, is 174 units divided by 3, which is obviously the limit of 174 divided by 3,000.
Okay, and then you'd have the remaining would be single-family homes, but that, you know, obviously single-family homes takes up more space, so they dropped 100 and something units, or 173 units, I think. Yeah. And then then they added the hotel to it, so there'd be a luxury hotel there too, a 4-star hotel. Can you tell them what they're approved for? Why don't you come up here? And get them on the mic so we have you, because we're recording this for the web, so.
So smile pretty for you. So the PCN3 zoning, which is this zoning right here, or I'm sorry, PCN3, yeah. It's zoned 398 units. It has been zoned for that since day one when we annexed this into the city. The overall density was set. And the interesting thing to remember is that our comprehensive plan is based on 7 units an acre for residential development. You'll see that reoccurring number when you look at mixed use and other places throughout the city. This development at 1,364 units comes out to about 5 units an acre. It's actually lower than most of the density allowed within the city.
So that's the difference between development that doesn't have stormwater and development that does. So it's scrunched up into one area. Yes, sir.
You may be able to answer my question best of all. What is the reason for the 30-year moratorium on local housing? Is this sort of a land use control?
Well, no, the military has control. This is south of the Shearwater area. They have a right to develop it, even though it's owned fee simple by Hunt Development Group. It's embedded in that agreement with Hunt that they have a right to develop as military. And the piece over here, the military piece that's already built, I think there's some language in there that in 50 years the military has an option of tearing it down and having it rebuilt again. So, you know, it goes in this 50-year cycle.
So it's that they're just preserving the rights to redevelop.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
So Hunt Pinnacle is a privatized military housing provider, and they have military housing projects all over the nation. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So point to those 85-foot condos. Those
Yeah.
are.
Oh, you got the pointer.
4 of them?
There's 3.
3?
Yes, sir.
And they're on the west side of the island?
Yes.
And so nothing south there can go over what's the
So this area right here is 85 feet. Nothing, there's no other, all of this is 35.
along the island?
Oh, along A1A over here?
Way down south on the west side.
Oceanis.
It seems selected that they have 85 feet, and the other lots that are all the way down along the A1A corridor are capped up at 30.
5.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
I'm kind of new to the
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
remembering what I've read.
Yeah, this is the only, so the military, when they came in, they needed a certain value for this property to make their military housing work over here. And you get value when you allow density and height. And so this is, yeah, this is where, this is
Yeah.
where their value is. And so when they came into the city, they said, for us to be able to privatize our housing, we have to have this. So that was it. So the city was basically, confronted with either it comes in the city or they go to the county and they get the same thing in the county. I mean, that's basically where we're at,
Another thing that the military did is they embedded in the PUD language the allowance for 5% commercial within the entire PUD. They didn't designate an area for it, 5% commercial. So you got basically 264 acres at 5% of that, so roughly 13 acres. The hotel that's being proposed is approximately 4 acres, so it's considerably less. And again, it could go somewhere down here, or it may not ever get developed at all, but that language has, again, been in the PUD document since it was originally developed, 5% commercial.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just confused on your last answer. This is a private developer that's building.
Up here. That's correct. So
All of
when
it.
the military came in, they owned this whole thing. Okay? This was all military housing. And when they wanted to privatize the housing, they were selling this to a private developer.
So I guess maybe his question was what prevents some other private developer buying land along the and getting a pretty for higher.
Because they have to go to the voters now.
It's in the charter.
It's in the charter. So this was done before the charter was created, the charter amendment that was created. So we're going to talk about that charter amendment. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
If they could change their mind and instead of having any single family there, they could do all of those 85 feet.
That's correct.
They'd be capped at the, yes, they would be capped at the 398 units, of again, which they've reduced that considerably.
I think they recognize, though, that wouldn't be a good fit here. I feel like they did. So when they came in to plan what they were doing, they were like, maybe we're going to go down a little bit, So, yes, sir.
Well, as a follow-up question to that, once they bring in plans for single family that are going to fall in behind the high-rise, can that be rezoned to where it will stay single-family resident area, or will it still be subject to somebody coming in and buying out all of that?
Yeah, if the owners want that, sure. If the owners of the property
The owners want what?
to downzone it, yes, they could. Yeah.
If the property owners of that single family,
Yeah.
if they choose to have it rezoned to single family, then that can be done.
That's correct.
They can go through the process.
They can go through the process. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any properties on the west side of A1A going south, tell me one more time why they can't be properties?
On the west, I'm sorry.
West side of A1A south, anywhere in south.
Oh, here, let me get to the zoning map real quick so you can see, because it's zoned that way. That's why, because we have.
Can that be changed?
It can be changed by the voters, which we're going to talk about. Okay? So here is, so this is what it looks like now. We went through that. Here's kind of like the building permit history, just so people understand kind of the level of building permits we get in the community. So when I go to like a city manager meeting and people kind of go, the cities kind of go through what their growth patterns are, and West Melbourne's like, yeah, we approved 4,052 units today. And we're like, well, we did 28. So that's just, so people understand And we talk about, new residential units. There's a lot of single-family homes that get built on lots that have, are vacant. Most of our city's platted already, so that's mostly what that is.
And I think it's important to note that we're about 98% built out. You're not seeing development, you're seeing redevelopment, which is a very good thing.
Yeah, every lot in the city has been developed previously, except for the properties on the beach that we were able to preserve. So every other lot that you see that's empty right now had something on it before. Every single one of them. Okay, so this is our population history, because I get this a lot, where people are like, oh my God, we're being overrun by people. So we've actually lost population over the years, and that's because of the base. So the base has declined in population, and I think most people, I'm a military brat, I know that. I remember working at BA's Deli back in the day, and I'd come in at 10:30, 11 o'clock. That place was packed with uniforms, and you don't really see that anymore. And there's, just our defense mechanisms are different now, nationally. So there's. Okay, so okay. So this is the population today, okay? And this is using census data and census tract data for all of this. And we had to break it down at the, in 2010 and 2016, because that's the only type of data that we could get for those years. So now we're actually less than what we were in 2000, okay? And this includes South Patrick Shores as well as the base. And that's important to note because what depends on people over here? Commerce, right? Businesses. So if you walk into any of our local business restaurants, ask them how much they depend on the snowbirds, and they'll tell you their season is a big deal for them. They can't go without that. And so I joke around like, the snowbirds, that we hate the way they drive, but man, they keep our restaurants open. So we want, we have to make sure that we always are cognizant about population because of that. So we don't have a bowling alley anymore for a reason. We don't have these other commercial businesses anymore because we've lost a little bit of population, and there's no real chance of gaining more. So that's why you see that. So we have, because of our efforts to preserve things, we've reduced our potential living units from our tax base over the last 50 years by 913. And so you could see all of the places that we've acquired over the years, and that includes our downzoning. So we've done quite a bit to preserve our community, but at the same time, there's a cost to that. So we always have to be cognizant, and it's always a balance. Like if we go too far on one side, you'll get consequences to that. So we always try to keep a balance.
Can you just briefly touch on what unsuccessful means?
Where's that? Say that again.
Legend on the previous, yes. Yellow? Yeah, the yellow.
Oh, we were unable to acquire those properties.
Okay.
So we were unsuccessful in doing that. And that was either because the grant funds ran out, or the property owner was unwilling to sell. And that happened at Oceana. We tried to buy that property, but the property owner was unwilling to sell. And then when he did want to sell, it was way too high for us to purchase it. It was just too costly, so we couldn't afford it. Yes, ma'am.
Which is better for the tax base, the satellite beach, having a hotel, or would be having the single-family or condo units?
Condominiums and hotels are definitely better for the tax base, if that's what you're asking, because the larger the project, the more and also the more expensive the project. Yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah. So once the development goes in, they pay property taxes just like you do, so you get that revenue every year. Yeah. So that's a good question that you brought up, though. There, like areas like West Melbourne and Palm Bay, Titusville, areas that are what we consider growth cities, they depend on new growth for their cost, to pay for their cost increases. So every year we have to give employee raises. Sometimes we have to hire new staff. We have new requirements to fulfill, like TMDL requirements and stormwater. We have healthcare increases for our employees, and so on. I can just go on and on. Construction cost increases, and so West Melbourne and all those places that have high growth rates, that new construction coming in adds to their tax base, and they don't have to really raise their millage rate because the new growth is paying for it. In Satellite Beach, if we left our millage rate the same, and we have to depend on your property valuation increases, you know? So if we keep our millage rate the same, we only get about $300,000, and that pays for staff raises and healthcare. That's it. So, you know, new growth matters quite a bit when you're trying to solve problems, especially infrastructure problems. Yes, sir.
The yellow area at the top across from the Pelican Coast,
Mm-hmm.
if it's unsuccessful. You mentioned the hotel, you want to work that area.
The hotel's right here.
Right, okay, so.
No,
how
this
big is that area?
this is actually under public ownership right now. But it's the county, if I'm not mistaken. Right? Yeah, it is. It's the county. And a house. There's a house there too. Yeah, yeah. And that's the other thing too, is the county owns property along the beachfront too that we manage for them. So they had a referendum way back too, and they helped us acquire some of this property. So we've worked pretty well together in trying to preserve some of this stuff. So this is the allowable density map. And so you can see here where all these little yellow ones right here, that's single family. And then this orange is single family but a higher density level. And then you have your purple right here. This is what, you know, the higher beachfront condominium density here. And then this is the gray at the PUD, okay? And we would love to have this on our website, but we've had to take a lot of stuff off the website and get it reformatted for ADA accessibility. So when we get it back on, if you want any of this stuff, just call us and we'll email it to you. It's no big deal. But we just can't have it on our web right now.
Ground a little bit in this, where is like DeSoto and Cassie,
Mm-hmm.
and Shearwater? Well, I know where Shearwater.
There's Shearwater.
Yeah, it goes to
There's Jackson. Roosevelt. And Cassia. And DeSoto.
Thank you.
Okay?
Courtney,
Yes, ma'am.
is this in the updated current comprehensive plan?
Yes, ma'am. Oh, I don't know if this one is. I think we created this for you, for this meeting, actually. So it might not be. So don't quote me on that. But if you need it, just call us and we'll send it over to you. Say that again? No, not. We're going to have a video of it on the website, and it's going to be a link to YouTube because they can do the closed captioning for us. I know that it's been hard for people because I thought you had all this on your website, and we're like, no, we had to take it down.
If we wanted the PowerPoint presentation, we can access it and we can give it to us on TV.
Yeah. This is height, okay? So here you see the majority of the city is 35 feet, okay? And you see the 65, this is the waterfront or the ocean front, and then you see this one orange spot, that's 96, that's the Oceana. And that's the only property in the city that's zoned for that height, okay? And then here is the 85 feet, 27 acres that you see. So any changes to this map or the previous map that the city does would have to go through you to vote on, okay? It just up zoning, yeah. Because most people don't care about the down zoning. I care. That's correct. Yeah, if property owners came in and asked for that, we could do that for them, yeah. Okay, so this is the process of land use and development approvals. So you are here in the conversation where we're developing an idea, okay? Because I'm going to talk to you about this idea in a minute. And then then we create land development regulations, then we put the zoning district on the property, and then if they want any other approvals, it goes to council for any other approvals. And by the time you get to this spot, if the zoning's already on the property, they have rights then. So at that point, if you want to intervene, it's a little too late. So that's why we're having conversations about this now with you, okay? Concurrency, One of the reasons that a city council, there's very few reasons a city council can lawfully deny a rezoning or approve or deny an approval request for a developer. And that is, concurrency is one of them. And that means that public facilities must be available at the time of development. So basically the development must be developed concurrent with the availability of the public facilities. And these are the public facilities that are listed in the statute. Now, sometimes parks, even, we provide parks, but sometimes that's used. I've never seen it successfully used as a reason to deny a development, but it has been. Stormwater, water, solid waste, sanitary and sewer, and mass transit. A lot of stuff on Facebook, you'll see that, oh my God, why are you approving development when they can't, fix the sewers and stuff like that. This is the capacity of Cocoa Beach Sewer Plant, which serves the 27 acres that are coming in for approval in a couple weeks, okay? The PUD, right? So they basically, this is their words. I said, hey, what's your capacity? John did, not me. And this is their email back. It said, on average, the treatment plant, 6 million gallon per day design, has the additional treatment capacity of 1.8 to 2 million gallons per day. Based on an equivalent residential unit of 275 gallons a day, that would translate to 6,500 to 7,300 equivalent residential units. Obviously, those numbers would be in a perfect world with no infiltration, etc. I hope this helps. Let me know if you need any information. Okay? So that Cocoa Beach has plenty of sewer capacity for the 27-acre project. Okay? And they were vested for their concurrency well before when they got the project approved. Okay? Brevard County? Yes, sir. Equivalent residential unit. That means like a single-family house is basically the standard, and then you'll have a condominium maybe 0.75, and then a mobile home would be 0.5, and so that's how they calculate that. Okay. I'm sorry. Say it again.
What about hotels?
Hotels are considered commercial, so that's a commercial designation, because they are. So when you go back to Oceana and Ramada, thank you for bringing that up. A lot of people thought that, we can't support all that. Well, we were supporting a hotel there. And a hotel with the same amount of units, when people go to a hotel, there's traffic in and out of a hotel all day long. Trust me, I treat a hotel room differently than I treat my house. So everyone else does too. There's a lot more sewer use, a lot more electricity use, and, and so on. So the amount of utilities and public facilities that a hotel uses is way greater than a condominium. In a condominium, they're only there maybe a third of the time, and it's like a third occupied at a time. So there's less impact on public facilities with a condominium than a hotel, okay? So property rights, this is one of the reasons why you'll see a lot of people get so upset when they see a council or a county commission say yes when they thought they should say no, because there's a lot of laws behind that and a lot of property right laws that go behind that. So, they can say no, but they'll usually end up in court. There's consequences to saying no. And that means that they usually they'll go to court and end up having to approve it anyway. Or sometimes they have to pay for the valuation lost to the developer. And that is part of the Burt-Harris Act. And that's unique to Florida. I remember when that passed, I was in graduating college at the time, and we thought we had the best growth management laws in the world, and when this passed, we went, So it did put a lot of damper on our, growth management efforts, but this is what it means. If you basically create a regulation that devalues a property, then the local government has to pay for the difference. And if you go to court, we have to pay for their attorney's fees. So oftentimes we'll settle to avoid that. Okay. Here's some cases, and I'm going to just flip through these real fast because we're getting kind of late, but this is just some of the things that, when a city council and a county commission are approving a development, they're judges. They're considered judges. They're not considered legislative anymore. So it's called quasi-judicial. And that's why they could hear 100 people come and yell at them about how they hate this development, But when they get to the vote, they have to vote yes because they're voting on the evidence, not what people want. So that's the difference between a council when they're approving a development and when they're approving a park or some other thing like the residents want, okay? Same thing here. Density is one of the most important elements in the marketplace when determining land value. And that's something that people need to remember, that density adds value. And so when you increase density, you're adding value to the property for a developer, okay? And then here, this is basically saying, and here the city of Cala, they opposed more regulations or more requirements on a property owner when they went through their process, public approval process, and the property owner was like, hey, you can't do that. And basically the court agreed. You can't come in and tell us to do something later. Those regulations have to be in there, and we have to be able to expect those impacts. You can't just put it on us later, and it has to be evenly applied to every property. So you can't just pick and choose one property to be mean to. You have to be mean to everybody at the same time. Okay? And so what this means is property rights are really strong in the U.S. and in Florida, and that's just something we have to remember, and that councils are very limited in what they can say no to after zoning districts are established. So once the zoning's there, the right is there, okay? And that if the local government takes something away, they need to be prepared to pay for that value to decrease. So here we are, okay? And, yes?
The Florida bar actually says that the appellate courts are conservative and will favor the local government entities and our heritage because development obviously sometimes conflicts with the desire of the city to use the charter and and that's why courts have been generally in favor of government development. So it would be completely out of keeping, hundred-story buildings and smaller engineering. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, whether it's environmental concerns, whether it's safety concerns, there are a lot of different reasons to support a city government being accountable.
So the Florida bar often, attorneys often represent developers. So of course they're going to have the opinion that we get a better favorable decision. We disagree in that. So if you get a bunch of city attorneys together and ask them how they're treated during a Burt Harris case, you'll see a wildly different opinion on that. So this is where we're at, okay? And so we are trying to attempt right now to solve two major problems. And the first one is flooding and sea level rise, and then stormwater retention and treatment for the Inland River Lagoon, okay? I'm gonna race through it, because I know you guys are getting tired of listening to me talk. This is the second project that we did in sea level rise. This is 2070, so don't freak out. But this is something that we have to address because these are becoming the new floodplains in the city, okay? I understand that this is something you brought up at the last meeting, and we got a lot of complaints about people dominating the meeting and interrupting us. So this is not scaring people. So this is done by professional scientists that know what they're doing when it comes to sea level rise. And this is not scaring people. This is a fact that we have to address. And if we don't address it, the same people will be yelling at us for not addressing it. I can assure you that. So this is the 2070 high projection rate, and our Planning and Zoning Commission, when they received the presentations from the scientists that did these projections, agreed to use the high curve so that we could prepare for the worst. Now, this is sea level rise, meaning that this, by 2070, according to this curve rate, this is sitting water. However, with rains, these are now new floodplain areas, so we're trying to prepare for the future here. So now this is sea level rise, so this means just the rising seas. There's no storm here, okay? This is the storm. Now don't lose it because this is a big storm. So, and now you'll notice that I grew up here, okay? I just bought a house, you know, I've owned property here. I raised my family here, and I'm not moving. So don't lose it, okay? So these are things that you have to think about and prepare for. And if we don't think about and prepare for it, then we are doing a disservice to you. This is what we're supposed to do. It's our jobs. So we have to plan for these things. So this is a 100-year flood storm, 2040 high, and it's with 1.2 feet of sea level rise. And this would be a major storm coming through and the flooding that would occur with that, okay?
What's the storm parameters that we use to run that model?
Yeah, that's going to be presented to the council on the 21st at the workshop at 5 o'clock. Oop, wrong way, sorry. Okay, so then we also have stormwater impacts to the lagoon, right? And then so you see here, this is right out of the Lagoon, Save Our Indian River Lagoon plan. This is stormwater. These are the pounds of nitrogen per year that is inputting into the lagoon. This is stormwater. So you can see it's a big source. It's a big deal. That's why we do a lot of stormwater projects. Why we have buying property all over the place trying to put ponds in, and you know. And this is phosphorus, the loading of phosphorus. And you can see this is muck flux. This is why we do dredging, okay? Why we're getting ready to do dredging of all the canals. So these are part of, you know, these are the sources of the problems in the lagoon. If you go back to this, where do you think the elevation starts and declines? This is the higher, and it goes down to the river, right? So when we do stormwater, you'll see a lot of our ponds are located down here because we're trying to collect it before it gets in the lagoon. Because all of this area has no stormwater. Our entire city was developed in an area that, in a time frame that was before stormwater regs. So we are trying to get some of the biggest properties in the city, which are your commercial properties along A1A, to actually do stormwater. Because if they don't do it, guess who gets to do it? We do get to do it. And to give you an idea, this is ABC Liquor. And everybody knows where ABC Liquor is. Mm-hmm. I know the mayor does. I'm just kidding. You got to get lighten up somehow. But this is ABC Liquor, and you can see this is developed. It was actually developed after stormwater regs were in place, but before the newest ones were in place. So it would be even more stringent with this. So this is all the stormwater areas, right? And what else does it have? Parking. It's got some trees, right? Green space, and it has setbacks. Okay. The building is 15% of the site, right? This is an older development. This is right next to DeKine's. Here's DeKine's. This is the one that was just renovated. What do you notice? No setbacks, right? And what else is it lacking? Retention and trees. No trees. So the building takes up 37% of the site. So if you were a developer, would you knock this building down to build the 19% of your building back? No, of course not. So that's the challenge that we're encountering. So we're seeing a lot of renovations, but no tear downs and adding stormwater. And if you don't tear down and add stormwater, then we get to do it. And we just bought property at the end of Jackson, right around that that building with the green shutters. And that property cost us $565,000 to acquire. And, you know, that's before you even start putting the stormwater in. So, you know, if we were to do that to address the stormwater on all these properties, we wouldn't be able to. We don't have enough land to do it. And so we would end up buying houses, and, you know, that's something we really want to avoid. Yes, sir.
Is there any way that we can subsidize the city's expenditure on wastewater stormwater runoff by increasing taxes on properties like that?
Well, what we were proposing we can't have a tax rate that applies differently to different people.
I understand.
Yeah,
But-
so-
But if this is a commercial property, then it would apply to all commercial properties.
And residential, we have the same tax rate. It's applied everywhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and that is a law, the state law. You can't have varying tax rate. Yeah.
I haven't asked him. So you have all those houses with no stormwater,
Mm-hmm.
and basically the hill with the water going down the hill.
Mm-hmm.
So don't we need stormwater anyway because of the grass area with, it doesn't have any stormwater with
Mhm.
houses, so isn't most of the stormwater, like the areas, going to be down at the bottom of the hill anyway? Or is it
No.
dirt?
So if you go back to look at the map, for example, we did DeSoto Pond that took care of 300 acres of DeSoto, basically, that big pond. But that's after we also built the swale in DeSoto, baffle boxes throughout DeSoto, exfiltration under the ground that you can't see. There's a lot of stuff that we've done so far to that area. Yes, ma'am. Stormwater pipes under the ground that have band materials and little holes down, so there's a lot of projects that have gone in to take care of some of that stuff. We're getting ready to do Jackson. We're entering into an agreement with the school board to see if we can acquire some of their property down Jackson so we can put, stormwater in their area. And we also have, swales down Cassia. We bought the property at the end of Jackson. So there's a lot of projects that we have going on to treat the residential areas.
So you're confirming what I'm saying, like, 'cause that's where you have the flooding, right? You have the flooding on the west side.
Hold on just a second. Yes, ma'am.
Wondering, do the piping is there,
Yep. Yeah, those are called baffle boxes. So we have all those in place right now. Yeah. Yeah. We were actually one of the first cities in Brevard County to ever use baffle boxes. So like on Jackson, we're getting ready to change them out because they're first generation and now they're better, So that's one of the things that, some of the projects that we're doing is replacing them and upgrading them to a better kind. So when we get to commercial, this is an example of a property that was destroyed in a fire during the 04 hurricanes, right? 04? Yeah. And they came in and put their stormwater in their parking, and they went up 42 feet, and they got a variance from city council to go there, to go up 45 feet. So they went at 42 feet, because the height limitation in this area is 35 feet for commercial property, right? So they got a variance to go to 42, and that's what they did. So this is a 42-foot building right here. And this is right across the street from Pelican Beach Park. Okay? That's correct. This is before the referendum and so on. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, I live right there, and when that was going up, they said it would be a two-story building, and, we didn't have a problem with it being two-story, but they neglected to say that it was, from just what I heard.
Right.
That was what was talked about. We didn't know it would be actually like 3 stories.
Mm-hmm.
Put it up, so to put it so that, that it's not, when you say it's a 2-story, it's not really a 2-story.
I try not to use stories for that reason. Use feet and height. Yeah. Stick with the feet. Yeah.
I would have,
Yeah.
2-story was fine, but I didn't realize that it was going to be 3 stories.
Because that is 3 stories. It is 3 stories. It is, yeah.
We were told it was only going to be a 2-story building.
Yeah.
So,
And sometimes like that, information like that, we can't control too, because, neighbor tells neighbor and then it gets different. And it's Satellite Beach too. We all know that, right? Like the rumor mill is strong in this city. So this is an example of Cocoa Beach going, so what we're proposing is to do a 10-foot height increase to our commercial properties along A1A on the west side, only for commercial, to do stormwater under the ground. And this is a 42 feet building, and we're proposing 45. So that would be very similar in stature to this, okay?
So that would incorporate the stormwater necessity into the,
That's correct, into the regulations. So then, and then we wouldn't allow them to go up unless they did stormwater too. So that would be part of the proposal that we're putting together. Yes, sir.
So, you might be later on, you already done it.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's 35. You're going to propose it 45. And now when you say 45, you weigh 45 total feet or 45 feet to the last structural green, which you get architect and engineer to add on.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, we're talking about from the ground. So, yeah, because we want to be clear that, it'd be 40 feet from you come here. Give the technical term for it, but it's from the way we measure height today. Same thing.
So the definition of height will not change. It just we're asking for an adjustment upward from that definition. So that definition for height is based on the peak of the roof to the highest adjacent grade, basically the road crown. So in other words, you look at the elevation of the road, and you can use either that or you can use the base flood elevation. The problem with that is unless you're in a special flood hazard area, generally there is not a base flood elevation. So 99% of the time what you're using is the road crown, and then that's where you get your measurement.
And you're strictly talking about commercial property.
That's correct. It has to be commercially zoned. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
now there's some exceptions in the definition, such as elevator shafts, parapet walls, things of that sort, but generally speaking, it's the peak of that roof. That's where you measure, that's the maximum height.
Now, the area that we're talking about would be, and I'm going to show you the map in just a second. Whoop. Oh, sorry. But I'm going to show you exactly where it's going to go in just a second. Dan, let me just get through this real quick, and I'll get to you in just a second. So this is Cocoa Beach's height amendment. They just went through this, and you can see where Cocoa Beach, the idea that they went through is, see this area here is stormwater already, right? They're putting all their parking under the ground, and then the rest is structural. And then here, all of this area right here is used for parking. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that area. They would need to make things like that ponds, because this is where we're at now. All the cities have the same challenges, and Cocoa Beach is no different. And so that what they're trying to do is shove all their parking under the ground of structures and get their height up, okay? Cocoa Beach actually had to get a variance for their fire station. So these are some of the things that sometimes residents don't think about when we do charter amendments. We have, 45 feet height limitation at Cocoa Beach. They had to get a variance for their fire station. When we did in Titusville, they shot down a charter amendment for a 35 feet charter amendment because they wanted movie theaters, and they realized that their movie theaters wouldn't be able to come in, because they're usually, if you go out to Vieira, that movie theater is about 65 feet in height.
Could you explain how, on those corporate buildings, how the stormwater works? Is it retained to the ground?
It depends on how they do it. So stormwater can be handled a number of ways. Normally what you will see, in my opinion, is the parking be under the structure, and you'll see the stormwater on the rest of the remaining property. Sometimes they can do it under the ground, and so that's a possibility as well. Yes, so usually if you don't see the stormwater on site and it's recently built, that's because this. It's a stormwater system under the ground, so it percolates into the ground. It's like having a pond, but under the structure. I will be glad to explain it to you after this meeting, okay? So,
My thing was
Oh.
similar to hers, in that, you said a moment ago that you want to raise building heights and you can put stormwater under the ground.
no. So we're looking at a 10-foot height increase so they can have more room to fit new requirements of stormwater and parking onto the property. And because they can't fit that now, they're not renovating, they're not demolishing the buildings to come up to standards. They're just renovating them so they can avoid having to come up to standards. And that's what we're going through.
The rate for parking as an incentive is pretty.
It gives them room to do it. Yeah. So here's, yes, sir. You guys are killing me here. Okay. Okay.
Kind of get a hold of them and you will see exactly how they do the conversion. It's got it raised up.
Yeah. Okay. But they've seen, it's very similar to development, and yeah, and you're right, because there's a lot of good examples out there. We just don't have that really around here. So the city of Key West has gone through the same thing. They decided to allow people to go up, so they could stilt their buildings, and it was after the storm because they lost a lot of structures. And if you drive down there now, they're constructing all their new structures, on stilts, every single one of them. Yes, sir. Okay.
Says the prohibition on initiative and referendum stated in paragraph A and B of the remedial and applies retroactively to any initiative or referendum process commenced after June 1st, 2011, and any such initiative or referendum process commenced or concluded thereafter is deemed null and void and of no legal force and effect. Now, that explicitly states that if you modify the charter height, that it would be null and void. Now, would that mean that we no longer have any height restrictions, or would it just be legal?
So that interpretation I told you at the last meeting was incorrect. And so this is what I was talking about earlier. So
The state attorney issued a legal advisory opinion. The state attorney general,
you're,
clearly, what I'm saying is in fact 100%.
we're going to have to agree to disagree, because that interpretation is incorrect. The statute, the bill that we were talking about was limited to development orders. So what the people, in fact, we had it in our charter, the ability to, if we had any development order in the city, so anybody comes in, like doubles come in and gets a permit, that's a development order. A residential unit comes in and we issue them a permit, that's a development order. So what was in the charter was any development order had to be approved by the voters. And the legislature said, that's impacting property rights. So they disallowed those. And that is what was taken out. And you all voted to take that out of the charter at the last election because it just wasn't, it was null and void at that point. So it does not apply to your ability to vote on your regulations of your city, because the legislature, and the courts basically said that's your right, is to be able to vote on zoning and, density and stuff like that, because it's basically the same thing as the council doing it. It's just now you're doing it through a vote. Okay. So, if anybody has any questions on that, I'll be glad to respond to you individually. Okay. This is Mexico Beach. Mexico Beach, as you can see, it went through a 5, and I hope we never do that. But you can see the ones that made it, okay? Right? I know. It's so terrible. Yes, go ahead. Of course.
So my thing, when Courtney and I were talking about this, my end of it was more towards this. If you see areas in the last 20 or 25 years that hit by a major hurricane, nobody's building the same building because they did 25 years ago. So you look at Key West, you look at Big Pine Key that got hit this year, if you look and see what was standing after it, it was the houses that were built in new building codes that were on stilts. In Big Pine Key, a lot of the stuff that got blown away was stuff that were built on ground floors, construction from the 60s, mobile homes. You go to Charleston, South Carolina, you go to Louisiana, you look at the areas that got hit. This was the picture I told Courtney. You got to look at the impact of that picture. That was a town. Could be satellite view. God forbid, you look at what's standing, a building built on stilts. And that just didn't impact the houses there. It closed schools that are still closed because the people aren't moving back. Again, there's nothing there. So as much for me, I keep telling people, I never want this to happen to us, but it could. You know, it could. And I think if you look in the future, storms, whether it's cycle, whatever, seem to be getting stronger, get hurricanes earlier. And this is just, to me, if you do certain things, you get it. If you don't, then you don't get that height. But to me, this is, for me, what I'm interested in, sustainability of our city.
So one thing, no,
I don't know, I don't know, maybe somebody had already asked, Joel, well, across from,
yes, sir.
there, on ground.
Yes. Because we're talking about changing the code to allow that. So this is Mexico Beach, one of,
That was city property, it should have been encouraged.
that's what we're trying to get to happen.
And, you know, Mr. Mayor, I like your point, what you're saying, and
I'm going to cut everyone off right now and let me finish this, okay? I have to do it because people are getting tired and they want to go, okay? So no more questions until I get through this, okay? I love y'all, especially you, okay? But we need to get through it. So this is Mexico Beach. Mexico Beach, when they had the hurricane, they did a moratorium, a building moratorium for a year because they were trying to figure out how to rebuild. So the last thing we want as a city is to have to go through one of these and sit and plan after the storm happened. That's why we're trying to go through it right now. So if you see it, you know, we don't have a need for all this, or, you know, always think of 20 years ahead and think of if something happens, we want to be prepared for that. And so they actually had a building moratorium. They decided their commercial buildings were 48 feet in height, and their residential buildings were 32. And they decided not to increase their height. But they did have to change their code to allow the stilts without a bunch of variances. So that is something that they had to change. And that was a discussion, a long discussion among their residents and their council members, because it's character. It's about your city, the way it looks, and having to think of a different look, you know. And so I wanted to bring that up because I get constantly, you know, we're going to turn into Fort Lauderdale, and like this is Fort Lauderdale. If you've never been there, their highest building's 442 feet. Okay, we're talking about this. Okay, not this. This. So not 442 feet, but 42 feet. So we're putting it in perspective. Okay. So perspective. There's not a lot of vacant lots left. Yeah. So, okay, so this is the proposal, is to move, we have commercial properties along this area, right? And they have the ability to put mixed-use units on their property, okay? We want to move those units, which is about 200, to these properties here, to give the developers or property owners here the value to create, to get them to move up. To give you an example, when you go, like, when you pull up a commercial structure, what's something you have to comply with? ADA. And what does ADA require? Elevators. John, what was the last elevator cost of Lungs RX? $250,000. So those are huge costs that they would incur. So by allowing them to put units on top of their commercial building, that would give them the value that would encourage them to do this. Okay? So that's like what we've always done. When we prove density over here, we take it from over here, and that's kind of what we're proposing here. Yes.
So let's say we go from still, and then they have whatever pocket space, whatever, and then
That's correct.
so that's really.
Right. And so when you look at the size of these properties, you're looking at 4 or 5 units per property. You know what I mean? And of course, like, none of this is going to happen tomorrow. I mean, it's going to take like 25 years for any of this to pan out. So it's be a gradual change. But we're also very nervous about approving any new residential units in that flood area, and encouraging more residential development there. So we want to move it, into this area here. And so that would be about 200 units. And that's, the same size as like 2 Oceanas, but spread all the way down A1A. Okay, just to give it kind of perspective. And the reason why, and when I say Oceanas, when you look at condos and you think like, oh, there's got to be so many units in there, and you realize it's only 45, it's because those condo sizes are bigger than my house. So if you look at Oceana condo, the smallest condo is bigger than my house. So they're big units. They're very big. And so a lot of people don't realize how large they are. And you're not going to see that type of unit size, on the top of a commercial building.
With all the properties on South Patrick, if you're moving them, encouraging them to go to A1A, what happens to all that?
We're not encouraging the commercial businesses to do anything. We just don't want them to build out residential units on top of their structures over here. Okay? So we're not encouraging people to move or anything like that. And this here, in my opinion, is engineerable, if you understand what I'm saying. Like, we can engineer our way out of it. I am confident that we're going to be able to provide enough flood control and, stuff like that to be able to continue. But what we don't want to do is encourage residential units in areas that we might not be able to do that in. Yes, ma'am.
Why don't we just build stuff on that red zone? I mean,
You can, but there's businesses already there. Like, it's already built out, and we want stormwater here. You want to capture it before it even goes down here. Because if you capture it down here, you're basically adding water down here where you don't want the water. You want to retain the water up here. Do you see what we're saying from an engineering perspective? This is A1A. This is Jackson right here. Okay? And this is Cassia. So when you capture the water up here, you're lessening the water that comes down here. And that's what you want to do. You want to capture it while it's up here. Okay? So that's the proposal. And we're going to be going through, go ahead.
Where does, if we cut the stormwater further east, where does it go? Does it?
It goes into the ground.
And out to the river?
Yeah, it goes into the groundwater. And so that's, when you look at, when we're looking at Lagoon restoration, and I've been involved with that for 20 years. And when we were originally starting the stormwater, efforts to do water quality for stormwater, the DEP thought it was the outfalls, that all of our outfalls going out and we had to capture and treated the water going on the outfalls. And when we started doing our data collection, we realized it's not the outfalls, it's the groundwater. And so, that's why you see new ponds coming in with the BAM under it, like we call it bioactivated material, that filters out nutrients before it gets to the groundwater. So that's why the preferred method of stormwater treatment is ponds now. And that's why we want them to do their individual ponds here and swales. So you'll see us put in swales before we put in a pipe now for that reason.
just another perspective of that is that catching it here, not running down the street, and making all the way.
Perfect, yes.
It's going right there, and we need to like collect it locally, but right now, it currently goes down the gutter, to your sources.
Picks up all the fertilizer, picks up all the sediment, yeah.
Oil, whatever, and it's collected from the road, so it's this way, that's another plan.
Yeah. You try to stop it at the site. That's why, new requirements require on-site retreatment, on-site treatment and retention. And, so us doing it is actually worse. It's better for the property owner to do it. And obviously the residential property owners can't. So we're trying to take care of the residential areas, but the commercial properties can. It's big enough for them to be able to do that if we make it easier for them to do it with the regulations. So I'm done, pretty much. If there's any other questions, yes.
I just want to know about the height. So right now, commercial properties can only be 35 feet.
That's right. That's correct.
Condominium
On west side of A1A only, yes, okay.
Condominiums are 65 feet anywhere south of Shearwater, except for Lagoon.
Pretty much along A1A, yes. Mhm.
Why is this group on the other side of Shearwater allowed to everyone else is 65?
That was just what they planned back then. They went through a big planning process, and that's what they chose. No. That wasn't in the city, and didn't have zoning. It was a federal installation, and it was annexed in the city. The city was able to create a zoning district for it and add zoning to it. So they created zoning for that specific property only. And that was the development plan that the city decided on.
And they needed X number of units in that plan you developed to make it work.
Yes, sir.
1,300.
When you talk about the stormwater management, the only time it's not working, not supposed to get to multi-residential or residential, anything new residential, so when it tears down or rebuilds, it's not happening.
That's correct. So it's different for commercial property regulations and residential. So once a residential area is platted, that's it. So when let's say you buy a lot in a platted neighborhood, so a plat's already recorded, and not all of Satellite Beach is like that. If you buy a vacant lot, for example, you will not be required to put stormwater on that property because it's already platted. But a site, which is what a commercial property is called, even though it's already platted, it's still called a site. And they're required to do stormwater the minute they tear down the building and move the foundation.
Is this state law?
Yes. It's state and county and city. And we go by the state, so we don't have any additional regulations. Okay. So you all would be voting on it. So we want to make sure that we get, feedback from the residents, propose it to them. It wouldn't go to the voters for a while. We want to make sure that people have enough time. I'm going to have probably 4 more of these meetings and do the same exact presentation. So if you get another mailer and you've already been to this and you've got it, don't come to another one. But but we're going to, make sure that people have a chance to hear. And then if everybody hates it, then council will figure out what to do. But this is the process that we want to go to. So we don't, in our city, we've never just done anything without, going through a lot of meetings and stuff like that. So go ahead. Yes, sir.
This goes to 45 feet, is conditioned upon they're doing something.
Yes.
about storm. Now, do you have a list of remedies that you have approved?
No.
Can they-
So what we would do is, if that's, I would recommend that the height only be allowed if they're doing stormwater, if they come into compliance with current regulations, basically. And so then in that instance, that's basically how the amendment would be phrased. So, and then, go into the comp plan, and then the requirements would go into the zoning, after the residents voted on it.
So the current regulations pretty much force them to build up and comply with all the stormwater.
Yes. If they tore their building down today, they would have to do that. And they don't want to because they don't have enough room for everything. And so,
Also allow for more pleasurable, better updated.
yes. Yeah, so that's the thing is, even though, we all love our city. I mean, I do. I love it. And every time I see something change, there's still a part of me that's like, oh, But the development in 1960s and 70s were horrible for the environment. Those patterns of development were horrible. And so that's why our lagoon is in this condition. It's not new development. New development takes care of their stormwater. It's the old development that's the problem. And so that, trying to encourage that redevelopment on the big sites that are seas of asphalt right now is what we're trying to accomplish. Yes, ma'am.
So worst case scenario, and that lovely, that whole loop conceivably could be, when it's built up, as what you propose, could be 45.
Yes, ma'am.
So the whole line of A1A could be all 45 feet buildings all the way along there.
That's correct.
Okay.
But again, they'd have to meet current code. So you're looking at, right now, a building may take up, 3/4 of the lot. New buildings would take up, a quarter of it because, There'd be a lot of empty space, that's right. So you're not going to have a wall. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So all what I am doing is picturing all
Yeah.
these buildings all the way along. Although Fort Lauderdale is 440, but when you're driving in a car, all you see is buildings. So it's the same thing whether it's at 40 feet or 400.
Right. No, and they have to meet setback requirements, which current development does not. So when you go to a lot of the developments now, they're built right up to the side of the property. Now they have a 20, 30-foot setback, that's the current, whereas the older development doesn't. So they have to meet setbacks, they then now have to, basically they're scooching their property in and going up so they can make room for all this environmental requirements. Okay? So yes, this would all be 45 feet in height, but because of the new requirements of building requirements and zoning requirements, there can't be a wall. So we don't have the same zoning like Fort Lauderdale and stuff like that. Those are like downtown zonings where they really don't have any setback requirements. A lot of their stormwater is regionally done, so they have the buildings right up to the street and stuff like that, which we don't have. So it's a different, look. Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah.
Like, in the last meeting, you said that building met those requirements, but you're saying that building, you don't think it doesn't meet those requirements, is it setback?
I don't think they meet the setbacks. I think they let them build back because of the fire. So I don't think it meets setbacks.
So is the charter reference in the comp plan?
I don't know why it would be. No. Yes, sir.
The question might not be related, well, I was going to ask Airbnb. I know you guys talked about it before. I'm dealing with one still. I'm not sure what the status is.
Where are you at? Satellite Avenue? Which one?
The one on Lynn?
Okay. So we are in court with 2 companies right now because they just don't want to listen to us, but we don't allow them. We were fortunate back in 2007. I was actually on the Planning and Zoning Commission or board at the time because I lived here, but I didn't work here. And we did that ordinance, which allows short rentals 30 days or more along the beach in the condominiums, and then 6 months or more west side of A1A. And because our ordinance was passed before, I think it was the 2011 preemption of the state, we were grandfathered in. The state basically, once Airbnbs and property management companies started making a lot of money, they started appealing to the state to get rid of our regulations, and they actually did. But what they did do is grandfather the cities that had regulations in place. So we were fortunate that way. Every year we have to go to Tallahassee. Mindy and I go. Councilman Dominic Montanaro goes. We are to basically argue with our lobbyists to make sure that we keep that grandfathering. And every year it's a fight, I have to say. So if you all have any time on your hands, calling the state reps that we have Thad Altman. He's definitely, most of our local delegations on our side, but it's the people that live in the middle of the state that don't have this prevalent vacation rental problem that listen to the property management lobbyists and pass these laws, Agreed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you need to call that in. Call it in. We're very aggressive about it. John's team is very aggressive. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Awesome. It does take us a while, though, because the code enforcement process is I mean, it's incredibly slow, but that's the law, and, because property rights are a big deal in Florida, so the code enforcement process is pretty slow. But we actually decided to not use that process in 2 of them, and I think one of them's yours. Is that his that we filed suit on, or are we still waiting on that? Okay, so we did file suit, and then we're waiting on a ruling for another one on Carissa. They actually bought up 4 houses on Carissa, one company. So this is the new thing that it's a constant fight, and so I know it takes us a while, but we are fighting it as hard as we can. The one on Lynn?
Your attorney, I've talked to and emailed with a few times.
He's probably in the notification process, so How long has it been? Then I think that might be one of that we're in a lawsuit with. Lynn, near Carissa, right? Yes. That's the one. Yes. Yeah, that's the one that we filed suit with.
Our great satellite beach cops many times to come in.
Good. And keep calling us. I encourage you, if you have any problems with the short-term rental, and this is what they do. This is what they're here for. You're not bothering them. Everyone says that. Well, we didn't want to bother them. I'm like, we need the record. We need the record of it. So the more they come out to address the problem, the more we have police reports, the better our case is. So please call when you have a problem. Don't call if you don't have a problem, but call when you have a problem so they can come out and deal with it.
Imagine being an Airbnb, operator work up, what are you going to do? You're going to write reviews, right? Cops are here all the time. Well, then eventually the person who is not going to get money anyway, it's like in the process of elimination, you want to stay from the contract cop all the time, but you're trying to have fun. It's not fair for the people renting it either, because it's the expectation for out of their time. Like, I don't know, I don't think, I didn't do it in my house.
Yeah.
Should I be taking
Yeah, and take pictures for us and send them in. The more data we have, the better, and we'll be, and we're very aggressive at it. It just takes us a long time, and it takes a long time to go to court. I mean, that's a process we can't rush because that's it's the court's process. But
I can take pictures of whatever's going on in the backyard.
absolutely,
Obnoxious yelling and screaming all hours of the day and night.
anything like that would help us would be great.
I hear you say that there's an investment company for property.
Yes, ma'am. They're not all there, but they're in that area, in that general area. Yeah. But the backlash, I believe the backlash is starting to happen with, residents starting to get very upset. I just shared an article with council about Sedona, Arizona. That's a tourist area, and that 20% of their housing stock now is vacation rentals. They've closed an elementary school. They've shortened their library hours. So those are the impacts that can have when you're not aggressively fighting it. And so when the legislative session happens, if you see anything on our Facebook page where we're saying, hey, call these people right now, I really encourage you to take the moment to just call. Don't send emails. They get 100 of them a day. Pick up the phone and call them and tell them how mad you are. That helps immensely. So, legislators, I'll give you the numbers.
230 Marco Way, North Marco Way. Because that house may be an Airbnb
Can you
as well.
shoot me an email and we'll look into it? Yeah.
Oh, you do?
I think, I don't know.
No, it's not for sale.
Okay, so I'm going to let you go. All right. Bye, guys.